Hello, this is Wes from BMW BTS Editor, doing another video in our long string of videos. There's only 3 or 4 of them, but you might remember some of them from the Schuberth S2 and the Garmin 590, Zumo 590 LM. Today we're going to be testing out a device that's supposed to tell you if your helmet is still safe to use. So, this is what it is. It's called the Shok-Spotr, and I actually, unfortunately, have forgotten the name of the company. I'd have to look it up, but it's something engineering that makes this. And they do this for motorsports and for football helmets as well, and other sports, I think. And the whole idea is that it will tell you if your helmet has taken a shot hard enough to damage the inner part of the helmet, the extruded polystyrene, or EPS, that is supposed to deform in the case of a crash and protect your head. So it comes in a very nice padded box. So, and you missed this because we dropped it earlier, but just dropping it a few feet in the box doesn't trigger the sensor. You can zoom in a little bit and see the sensor in the middle is supposed to turn red in case of a shock big enough to damage the helmet. So it comes with instructions, and the back of the box says please read all the instructions before you open the box, which is good advice. We have installed the Shok-Spotr on an HJC Hellion CL16. You can see it there in place. It's held on with a very strong adhesive. It's rock solid once it's in place. It needs to be on the center line of the helmet, and there's instructions. There's really good diagrams in the instructions to show you exactly where to put it. So this is let's see what size helmet this is. This is, I think, this is an adult extra small, and the people that make the Shok-Spotr recommend, actually they beg you, to put it on a brand new helmet. Now this is not a brand new helmet. As you can see, it's got scratches and scrapes all over it, but this is the helmet that we can afford to test, so we're going to test it. We're going to do a couple of different tests, and we're going to see how much actual pressure it takes to set off the sensor. So we're going to knock it off a couple of things and maybe drop it, or if we have to, slam it down till we can turn that sensor red. So you come in here again and let's take a look at the sensor. You can see that the sensor is clear, and we're going to put it here on our friend George's car, and we're just going to do a typical drop. You might have your helmet sitting on the seat of your bike. You might have it on the edge of your table. You might have put it down on a picnic bench or a park bench or something. Somebody comes along, knocks it over. You might not even know it other than a couple of scrapes, but your helmet might be damaged. So we're going to see what happens when we just knock it off the car. You ready? And if you come in, you can see the sensor is still clear. So how far would you say that is? About 3 feet? So let's go up to 6 feet. We'll drop it from 6 feet and see if that's enough. This is about 6 feet. You ready? Our face shield popped off, which is not a huge surprise. And our sensor is still clear. So those two bare drops. Now, one thing that we aren't doing, we don't have a head form in the helmet, so maybe that would make a difference. There's no weight inside the helmet. So now we're gonna really give it a shot. So I'm gonna give it some force. Are you ready? And now you can see we've got a little bit of red in our sensor. And that was a pretty good slam. Not as strong as I possibly could have done, but a pretty good slam. So at this point, the folks that make the Shok-Spotr would say, this helmet is no longer safe to use. And I would have to agree, given the strength that I used to knock that down. So now we're gonna cut the helmet apart and see if we can see any damage to the EPS on the inside. we've done our test with our Shok-Spotr. You saw that the Shok-Spotr does actually work. It takes a really good amount of force. So just knocking your helmet off a table, knocking it off the seat of your bike isn't going to do the trick. Maybe knocking it down a whole flight of stairs would do it if it bounced. But an average knock or drop is not going to trigger the Shok-Spotr. It really does take a decent amount of force. Now we took another one of my daughter's old helmets. It's an HJC C. It's still the Hellion. It's the CJY. It's a youth small medium, and we cut it in half so we could see what's inside the helmet. And you can see that we've taken the liner out, but here's the EPS, or extruded polystyrene. Now in this one, I'm assuming it's EPS because that's usually what they make, but I should have to do some research and find out, because this actually looks a lot like plain old styrofoam. It's a little denser, it doesn't deform as easily, but it looks like plain old styrofoam. Now this is a perfectly undamaged helmet. There was nothing wrong with it. We just cut it up to see what the inside looked like. Here is the helmet that we tossed on the ground to trigger the Shok-Spotr, and we've cut it open as well. Now you can see it's made out of the exact same material as the other helmet, which they say is EPS, but feels like styrofoam to me, very hard styrofoam. It's got a black coating on the inside the liner, instead of the white, plain white. We can't see, we looked at this part of the helmet, which is where the most damage was from when we dropped it and threw it on the ground to try the Shok-Spotr. But when we opened it up, we can't see too much damage on the lining, so we can't be sure. Now, as we were cutting it apart, the liner did pop out, so we can see the vent slot in here with its beveled edge, and a plain old piece of tape holding it together. There's a bunch of tape in here holding this all together. And we can also see the fiberglass shell that the helmet is actually made of. It's actually quite flexible. It's got a good bit of flex to it. And you can see here that the chin strap is held in with a pretty solid, what looks like a rivet. So, and it doesn't move. We had snipped the strap off earlier to assist us in our cutting process. So that's the end of this experiment, and we thank you for watching WBTS. Take it easy.